They didn't break you, they didn't win. But they did take advantage of you, and here's the hardest part to swallow: you let them. Wait, don't scroll away just yet. This isn't an attack. It's an awakening, because if you've ever sat in silence after being used, betrayed, or manipulated, wondering why people keep crossing lines you never gave them permission to cross, then maybe, just maybe, it's time for a deeper truth. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They felt everything, but they chose not to be ruled by it. And they taught something most modern minds struggle to accept: no one can hurt you without your consent. Epictetus. That doesn't mean you're to blame for the pain. It means you're more powerful than you think. It means the door they walked through, you left it open, maybe out of kindness, maybe out of fear, maybe out of love, but still, you left it open. This is a call to reclaim your inner gate, to stop apologizing for having boundaries, to stop giving unlimited access to people who only take. If this stirred something in you, and if you're tired of repeating the same lesson with new faces, then stick around. We're diving into ancient truths for modern souls, and your journey back to inner strength is just getting started. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe it's time to stop being taken advantage of and start living with purpose. Let's walk this path together. People only do what you allow. So stop handing them the script. Let's get brutally honest. You don't get taken advantage of just because people are evil or manipulative. Most of the time, it's because, knowingly or not, you handed them the script, smiled, and said, "Go ahead." You allowed it. And I know that's hard to hear. It hurts because it forces us to look at the part we played. But that's exactly what the Stoics were all about: radical responsibility. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and still rose into one of the most respected Stoic teachers, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Now read that again, but slower, because somewhere along the way, someone treated you poorly, and instead of drawing a line, you rationalized it. You said, maybe they're just having a bad day, or it's not worth the fight, or the classic, that's just how they are. But every time you do that, you teach them how to treat you. You lower the standard and call it love. You make peace with disrespect and label it forgiveness. You give the keys to your peace and then wonder why they keep driving off with it. This lesson isn't about blame, it's about reclaiming. And if you're ready for that, you're already healing. Stick around, this is only the beginning. Your silence is not always noble. Sometimes it's permission. You might think staying quiet keeps the peace, that biting your tongue, holding back, or letting things slide makes you the bigger person. And sometimes, sure, it does. But let's be honest, how often is your silence really about wisdom? And how often is it about fear? The Stoics valued restraint, yes, but not weakness disguised as virtue. There's a difference between choosing not to react and being too afraid to speak. When you constantly let things go, not because it doesn't bother you, but because you don't want to be difficult or dramatic, you're not preserving peace. You're signing a silent contract. One that tells people, this is okay. You can do this again. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That includes the power to speak up, to say, that crossed a line, to say, no, I'm not okay with that, to say, I matter too. So if they took advantage of you while you kept your mouth shut, maybe it's time to use that voice again. And not with anger, but with truth. This is your permission slip to stop letting silence speak for you. The next time someone crosses your boundary, remember this. Your voice might shake, but it's still yours. Use it. People will take as much as you give. So learn to say no without guilt. Here's a truth we don't talk about enough. People rarely stop taking on their own. If you're always available, always saying yes, always showing up no matter how drained or disrespected you feel. They will keep coming back for more, not necessarily because they're bad people, but because that's human nature. If the door is always open, people don't think to knock, and if you never say no, they'll assume you don't need to. The Stoics had a firm grasp on the idea of limits, not just in the external world, but in how we give ourselves to others. Seneca, one of Rome's sharpest minds, wrote, "No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have, and to cheerfully put to good use what they do have." That includes your time, your energy, your emotional availability. It's not infinite, and it's not owed, but here's where most of us get caught. We think saying no makes us selfish. We think setting boundaries makes us cold or uncaring. So we overextend, we overcommit, we say yes with a smile while we're screaming inside, and eventually we burn out, feeling resentful, used, and invisible. Saying no doesn't make you unkind, it makes you honest. And saying yes out of guilt isn't generosity, it's fear. So here's your reminder. Your worth isn't measured by how much of yourself you give away. If they took advantage of you, maybe it's time to stop feeling bad for protecting your peace. Let no be your full sentence. Let your boundaries speak louder than your need to be liked. And let this be the moment you stop feeling guilty for choosing you. Not everyone deserves access to you. Stop handing out VIP passes to people who treat you like a backup plan. Let's get real. Access is a privilege, not a right. But when you're kind-hearted, when you care deeply, and when you've got a soul that wants to see the good in everyone, it's easy to forget that. You start thinking it's your job to be available, to listen, to help, to forgive, and to keep showing up, even for people who only show up when they need something from you. And before you know it, you're drained, disappointed, and wondering why people keep treating you like an option instead of a priority. But here's the truth. They only treated you that way because you gave them permission. Maybe not directly, but every time you let them back in after disrespect, every time you accepted breadcrumbs and called it love, every time you ignored your own intuition, you handed them a VIP pass to your life without requiring any respect in return. The Stoics understood the power of guarding your inner world. Epictetus said, "Keep your attention focused entirely on what is truly your own concern, and be clear that what belongs to others is their business and none of yours. Your energy, your peace, your time, that's your business, and not everyone deserves a seat at that table. So if they took advantage of you, maybe it's because you didn't set a clear price for admission. You let them walk in like it was a free-for-all, no boundaries, no expectations, no consequences. But that stops now. You are not a public park. You are sacred ground. Start treating yourself like it. Not everyone deserves access. Not everyone deserves you. Forgiving too quickly can be another way you betray yourself. Let's talk about forgiveness, the kind that's rushed, forced, and worn like a mask to keep the peace. The kind where you say, "It's okay," when it absolutely wasn't. The kind where you accept an apology with your mouth but your heart is still bleeding. If they took advantage of you, there's a chance that one of the reasons they felt so comfortable doing it again is because you forgave them before they ever truly earned it. Now don't get this twisted, the Stoics weren't cold-hearted grudge holders. They believed in releasing anger, in letting go of resentment, not for them, but for you. But they also understood the power of truth. And the truth is, forgiving someone who hasn't changed doesn't make you strong, it just resets the cycle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." You see, forgiveness is sacred, it's powerful. But when given too soon, it becomes a loophole, a get-out-of-jail-free card for people who never had to sit with the weight of what they did. And in doing that, you're telling them, "You can hurt me and I'll still be here." Real forgiveness doesn't mean immediate reconciliation. It doesn't mean you go back to how things were. Sometimes the most powerful act of forgiveness is choosing to move forward without them. So if they took advantage of your kindness, your patience, your forgiveness, maybe it's time to stop handing it out like candy just to avoid conflict. Maybe it's time to let them feel the silence, to let them sit with their choices, because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean returning to the scene of the crime. You taught them. You'd stay even when it hurt. Sometimes the most painful truth is also the quietest one. They kept doing it because you kept staying. You didn't have to say it out loud. They learned from your actions. Every time you were hurt, but stayed. Every time you were disappointed, but stayed. Epictetus once said, "A man is not harmed by the insult itself, but by his response to it, if he interprets it as harmful." Let that sink in. You may not be able to stop someone from being selfish, careless, or cruel, but you can stop returning to them expecting something different. If they took advantage of you, it's because they figured out that no matter how they made you feel, you'd still be there, still showing up. If they took advantage of you, maybe it's time to stop showing them that you'll stay no matter what. Maybe it's time to show you that you're finally ready to choose peace over pain. Healing doesn't start with them changing. It starts with you taking responsibility for what you ignored. Let's be real. The hardest part about being taken advantage of isn't just what they did, it's what you saw and let slide. That moment your gut whispered, something's off. That moment your inner voice told you, you deserve better. And still you stayed. You tried harder, you gave more, because deep down you wanted to believe the best in them more than you were willing to protect the best in you. And that's the heartbreak we don't talk about enough. The grief over the parts of ourselves we betrayed just to keep someone else close. The Stoics weren't big on blame, they were big on ownership. Epictetus taught, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. It sounds harsh, but it's liberating. Why? Because if your mind played a part in your pain, then your mind can also play the biggest part in your healing. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about breaking the cycle. You can't wait for them to apologize. You can't wait for closure. You can't wait for them to finally see your worth. Because the moment you make your peace dependent on their actions, you've handed them the keys to your freedom all over again. The real work starts when you look in the mirror and say, I missed the signs. I wanted it to be something it wasn't, but I see it now. And I forgive myself. That's how you take your power back. They took advantage of you, yes, but you're the one who has to choose whether that story defines you or refines you. You don't need revenge. You don't need them to feel the weight of what they did. You just need to stop ignoring what your soul already knows. Healing begins when you stop waiting for them and start choosing you over and over without apology. That's the Stoic path. That's strength. That's freedom. Your standards weren't too high. You just kept lowering them to fit the wrong people. Let's make one thing clear. Wanting respect, honesty, consistency, and emotional safety isn't asking for too much. It's the bare minimum. But when you're used to being taken advantage of, your mind starts playing tricks on you. You begin to question yourself. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe I should be more understanding. Maybe this is just how relationships are. So you shrink, you bend, you settle. And each time you do, a piece of you whispers, this doesn't feel right. If they took advantage of you, it's not because you were too demanding. It's because you kept adjusting your standards to accommodate their lack of effort. You traded your boundaries for breadcrumbs just to keep the connection. And maybe no one ever told you this, so let me say it now. Lowering your standards is not love, it's self-abandonment. The Stoics taught that our peace comes from within, not from how others treat us, but how we allow ourselves to be treated. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If you keep telling yourself, this is fine, when it's clearly not, your soul absorbs that lie. And over time, you forget what it even feels like to be honored, respected, and chosen without condition. If they took advantage of you, it's time to stop shrinking to fit their comfort zone. You don't need to be less. You just need to stop settling for people who give you less. Your standards weren't too high. They were your truth. Honor them. You didn't deserve it, but you don't have to keep reliving it. So, now that we've walked through this together, take a breath. Really? Breathe. You've probably realized by now that this wasn't just about them. It was about you too. About the little compromises you made, the warnings you silenced, the love you gave without asking for anything real in return. And here's the kicker. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The people who took advantage of your kindness, your patience, your hope, they taught you a lesson. Not the one they thought, though. The real lesson? You're done bending. You're done explaining. You're done being the one who gives everything and gets crumbs in return. But here's where most people mess up. They hear a truth like this, feel it stir something deep inside, and then scroll on. Back to distraction, back to the noise. Don't do that this time. If any part of this hit home, really hit, you owe it to yourself to sit with it. To not just feel the truth, but to start living it. Because this isn't just content. This is a conversation, a community, and trust me, you're not alone. So let's talk in the comments. Let's build something real, something healing, something stronger than what we went through. And next time they try to come back like nothing happened, smile politely and remember what you've learned here. You're not the same person who let it happen, and you're definitely not giving them that script again.